In the next 7 minutes, I'm going to be talking about how to grow with an account-based sales strategy. But what I'm really going to be talking about is how at Redgate we went from product-led growth into a sales motion. My role at Redgate is the Global VP of Sales, so I manage the entire sales function that's across many different offices globally. I report into the CEO and sit on the exec team as well. I've been at Redgate for 15 years, and I'll talk to you a bit more about that in a second. I'm not going to talk too much about what Redgate do. Many of you probably haven't heard of us, and that's because our end users are technical end users. So we sell database tooling. I'll tell you the key bits of information that are useful for you to know so that you understand the context behind what I'm going to be talking about. The first is that our brand is incredibly strong. So anybody that's been using a database tool on any platform will have heard of Redgate software at some point. That figure of 200,000 customers is probably way more than that. We've got a huge amount of people that know us globally. The other bit of information that's useful to know is that we offer most of our software on perpetual licensing, so we're still moving over to subscription. So we have a mixture of both subscription-based products and perpetual. But what that means is that we look at things still in annual bookings. And finally, we're privately owned. So that comes with good and bad, but what it means is that in our 22-year history, we've always been profitable. So this is my timeline at Redgate. I've been there for 15 years, somewhat of a lifer at the moment. But what I want to talk about today is a specific point in my career, which was in 2015, when I took a bit of a risk and started a new role as head of strategic accounts. And I'm going to talk to you a bit about what strategy I put together there in order to pivot into a sales motion for Redgate. So our starting point at Redgate, this is a really useful book. I'd recommend it to anybody, but with any strategy we roll out, we look at the core principles that Richard Rummel talks about in his Good Strategy, Bad Strategy book. That means you start with a very clear diagnosis, have a very clear guiding policy, and then a list of coherent actions, which we call key results. So in 2015, what was our diagnosis back then? So we had product-led growth since we started, and that had flatlined over the past 5 years. So since 2000, we just hadn't been growing revenue. And when we looked at that from a sales perspective, our diagnosis was there's not enough leads coming in from downloads and white papers. Our conversion rates are already incredibly strong. We're doing an exceptional job of making sure that we're contacting them quickly. Everything's working as we would expect, but there just wasn't enough of them. And we had to explore other lead sources to hit our revenue targets. It was predominantly inbound driven at that point. So those downloads were coming in, and most of our growth was going to come from existing accounts. So at that point, I said, okay, part of this new role that I'm taking, I'm going to take 50 accounts. Now, the average spend of our accounts in our system was I think about $1,000 per account in a given year. Remember, this is perpetual. So I took 50 accounts, and at the end of that year, made $2 million. So every single customer that I contacted of those 50 renewed. So I made $500,000 from that. The rest of them spent $1.5 million in new license sales. And this was the turning point because our CEO said, look, what we've done is we've fired a bullet here, and now we need to fire a cannon. This is a strategy that's going to work. And so that was a really big thing because he then jumped on this idea and stood in front of the entire company and said, look, we're going to make Redgate as successful with large companies as we are with small ones. What that meant is that product then started building our products in line with that buyer group. Marketing started pivoting their marketing strategy. And that was a big turning point for us. So what did that look like with regards to the sales org? In 2015, I just had one other person that I was sort of going after those 50 accounts with. In year 2, I brought on another 3 salespeople. I think we managed to do just under $8 million. So we could see it working repeatedly. And step forward to 2021, we've got 120 people across 5 different locations. So this is just a subsection of that model with account executives, BDRs, SDRs. We also have obviously a sales ops function and sales enablement function. So we've scaled quite rapidly. I mean, we are also at the same time looking to push that number up to about 200 in the next year. With regards to company revenue, we had flatlined at that 40 million number in 2020. We've been moving products onto subscription, which obviously it affects our annual bookings, but also we had the pandemic. I think we would have been looking to do about 85 million in 2020, had things been different, but this year we'll definitely be looking at that 85 to $90 million number. And how did we do it? There's three really key things when it comes to scaling that I think were the most important for us. The first is cultural alignment. So whenever we went into new territories or started a new office, it was really important that we had cultural alignment. That meant that quite often we would second people from the UK or transfer them over to start those new offices, not necessarily in leadership roles, but in a variety of different roles. Building a strong team, I'm really pleased to say that the original team that I started with in 2016 is still in the company today, helping us embed the process and policy that we came up with together in the early days. And then finally, training and development. There's nothing harder when you're scaling than to see your turnover rates increasing. And I really didn't want that to happen. And we've actively invested in training and development across the sales organization, which brings me on to my final slide. In 2015, we had a sales org where we just had a renewals function and an inside sales function. 2021, we've got a range of different career paths, ranging from inside sales all the way up to global accounts. Because of that training and development that we offer and the investment that we've made there, I'm really pleased that all of the global account executives who are now doing seven-figure deals regularly started in inside sales roles, and we've trained them up in a very, very quick time period. So finally, what's up next? We've opened, I went over and opened our Brisbane office, I think about 2 years ago, and then Berlin we opened in the last 12 months. We're going to be scaling both of those. Since we've opened them, we've doubled our revenue growth very quickly with a very, very small team. So we're quite excited to be scaling those up, and we'll be continuing our investment into the EMEA and US region. That's it from me. Thank you very much for listening.